running backs, we talk about, hey, running back being a different commodity than it was, even when I got drafted. And there's a chance this year Breece Hall might have something to say about that, and the Buffalo Bills might have something to say about that. But we might not see a running back selected in the first round. Do you think this trend just continues and and gets more severe, or do the running backs come back at some point in the next 5-7 years? And is this the year we don't get a first rounder?
I think you have an exception to the rule, running back, that you can take in the first round. But to me, I don't want to say they're rare, but you don't come by many of them,
Yeah.
I would much rather load up on, the position value, chart has almost changed in the last few years. If you look at it, it used to be it's always quarterback, and that's never going to change. But then it used to be left tackle, then edge rusher, cornerback.
Right. Now
it's quarterback and wide receiver. And if you don't believe me, just look at the number, the salaries that are being handed out and the dollars per year in the contracts. It's a fact. The general managers are telling you with the money they're spending that wide receiver is the second most important position. And that's remember growing up as a kid, everyone wanted to be, they weren't the quarterback, they wanted to be the running back.
Yeah.
It was just from Jim Brown to Emmitt Smith, in between, Roger Craig, and it was always Tony Dorsett. It was always the running back that was the star. But it's now wide receiver. It's just how the game has changed. Everything's in space and spreading it out. Chris, this game is totally different than it was 10, 12 years ago. So to me, running back, you want to get a guy that's different and special. But if there's not one in a class, you're certainly not going to reach for that position, because I think running back is down near towards the bottom of the list of guys you want to draft. Now, the good news is if you get a running back, you want to wear him out and pass him on to the next team.
Right.
I'm not worried about drafting a guy and spending rookie money.
Yeah.
Because that's not hurting my cap. I'm worried about if I fall in love with him and give him a second contract.
That's the only thing. It's the LA thing. That's the only thing with Todd, Gurley. Yeah. We were talking about, your namesake, Todd Gurley.
Yeah, and I would always draft him in the second, third round, and then let the next team pay him the big contract, because the next contract is where they're going to start to wear down and run down, and the injuries come in. And at age 30, they're, outside of Frank Gore and a couple other rarities, they're done. So I really like Breece Hall. I think Kenneth Walker out of Michigan State is the best pure runner in this class. With his speed, the way he just you watch Breece Hall. And everything's patience and flowing. And if it's outside zone, he's really good.
Yeah.
He catches the ball well. Yes, he has great time speed, but it's build-up speed. It's beyond 20 yards. That's when he can pull away, and that's great. But I want a guy that shoots out the gate,
right,
and runs with urgency, and everything's just snap with him. And he catches the ball really well, but you wouldn't know it because he only had 16 catches. But you see some of the practice tape, and you talk to the coaching staff. He can catch the ball, and you study some of the catches he made, away from his frame, on the move. I think he's going to be a great back. He's got to make a career decision. Does he want to learn how to block or not? Because right now he's abysmal in that facet, and you got to be able to do some of that in the league. But anyway, those are the two backs, and then after that, there's a big drop off in this year's class.
Well, it's funny because to me, as a defensive lineman, a dumb defensive lineman, I feel like running back is a very scheme specific position, and where listen, guys are going to talk about, is it Thibs or that's your
Thibodeau or Thibodeau?
Yeah, Thibodeau. Okay, good.
Okay,
have I been right?
Maybe.
Okay, maybe. Well, we're right now. Thibodeau.
Just like with Todd's mocks in years past, we're not going to run the tape back.
Yeah, so we're not running the tape back. We're right. We're right more than we're not right. But Tibbs, he could. Some people say, well, it depends on the scheme. I really do think a rusher can rush anywhere. You should be able to get pass rush production out of a rusher. But when it comes to running back, do you run a sideline to sideline scheme? Do you run something more downhill? Do you emphasize catching the ball to the backfield in your offense, which most teams should now at this point? And how important is it to pick up the blitz and to block? This is important stuff. I just wonder what those things are that would make you, and you just mentioned some of them. It's got to be the total package for a guy to get picked in the fir'st round as a running back, at least where I sit.
Breece Hall is, like I mentioned, the outside zone. He's a lot like Le'Veon Bell with the patience. Almost sometimes you wonder if it's to a fault.
Right.
It's does he know that the ball was snapped and it's in his hair?
Yeah.
Sometimes just and then he goes. And I'll never forget too, and this is kind of off the subject, but like talking to the Redskins personnel guys with the Shanahan offense and Redskins, Denver, you know, and how they always were getting backs in the third, fourth round that were coming in. Terrell Davis was, you know, a prime example. And I asked him, like, what is it that you guys look for that everyone else seems to be missing? It's like, it's not that everyone else is missing. It's like what we do is so specific with the zone concept. Like the number one trait that we look for and we study like over and over again is when they like patience. But then the most important thing is when they stick their foot in the dirt, they got to go. They got to accelerate. And like some guys, you'll see like they gather, you know, they get the ball, they're going outside, they're either going too fast or they just don't have that body control. But that was one scouting tool that I always took from that. Now, anytime I'm looking for, you know, a team matching a back, you've got to have that trait where you're going east-west, but when you see north-south, you got to be able to hit it in a flash.
Well, I think that's so on point, and it's also like, I'll whisper this, is like, that's also a great scheme for running backs, so they're going to look good in that scheme. I mean, look at some of the guys that they've had in San Francisco that have just blown up. I mean, Mostert was, you know, like, wow, who's this guy? He's on his sixth team, and now he's like the hottest thing. Well, scheme does have something to do with that, but they're right. They're looking for one thing, and then they're going to accentuate the skill set of that running back because the scheme's a very good scheme. The other question I had about trends would be, Joe Burrow last year, you know, we got to protect this guy. His knee nearly exploded his rookie year. I played with Sam Bradford. So I'm like watching it. I'm like, oh no, dude. Because this guy is so talented. And then the draft comes and they're like, he'll be okay. Let's go get a really good wide receiver. Is that going to be a trend now? Is it a copycat league? Are people going to stick to the old, you know, kind of way of thinking of we need the big guys to protect our quarterback before we go get the weaponry? Or have things changed?
That's a good question. I think weapons are more important now than the guys protecting and creating the holes.
Yeah.
But I still like you got to have guys up there. I think the biggest trend we're starting to see is like the player to player movement, not just free agency, but the trades. Yeah. Teams are identifying it. Like even, you know, Cincinnati went out and made a few moves on their offensive line.
Right.
And it's because it used to be where that was rare, where you're seeing a player traded, you know, for picks or for other players. Like, you know, the Seattle Denver trade had players and picks involved. Yeah. So I think it's become a lot looser in terms of like they weren't league restrictions, but they were just kind of the old guard, the way that it used to be. And that's why I say Les Snead, like, he didn't start it, but he certainly like amplified it. And I think more teams are following that now. And we saw this offseason, the amount of trades, like actual trades for players that were under contract was unusual. It was, I think, the most we've ever seen. So and I think teams are realizing like, all right, if we've got a hole, we got to go fill it, and let's get it filled before the draft so we can actually pick the best player and not be like, you know, pigeonholed or handcuffed to that one specific spot.
When it comes to, you mentioned the wide receiver class, the kid from USC, is that Drake London?
Drake London, yeah.
He's enormous, dude. I saw him in his workout. I was like, oh my God. And then they were like, hey, run. And he was like, I don't need to. Watch the tape. Yeah. Like, how does that go?
He doesn't need to because he was going to run a 4.6.
Okay. But yeah, that's fair. I think everybody knows like 4.6 would be, I would take the over on that. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. I think he might run slower, but does it matter?
It doesn't matter when you lead the nation in contested catches.
Yeah.
Being open is a different animal for Drake London than it is for a 5'11" slot wide receiver.
Right.
Like there's different ways to get open. Late separation is the ability to utilize your body, check a guy, hand-eye coordination with the guys hanging on you, and go up and make the catch. And like it's not just me watching the tape; it's actual. Like, look at the numbers, the analytics of guys with contested catches. He's led the nation the last 2 years.
No question.
And he's so good when the ball's in the air. And he's also pretty good after the catch, too. He's 6'4", 219 pounds. He's like a shooting forward playing wide receiver.
Yeah.
With the body control and the way he gets his feet in the sideline. And he knows how to do it. He's got a unique skill. And with that catch radius, you can be off as a quarterback and still wind up with a 15-yard completion. And then that's a luxury.
Yeah, it's almost like if you have a young quarterback, depending upon his skill set, you're almost picking a different wide receiver. And I mean, Drake London's going to make most guys look better on these 50-50 balls. So if you got a guy who's a little bit off, throw in the money balls.
Yeah, like a Jalen Hurts, that would be perfect.
Perfect.
Because he misses and he tends to miss high.
Yeah. You watch the Eagles too. Yeah. I'm like, hey, I'm like, this fucking guy, I'm like Leo on the couch. But I still really like Jalen Hurts, and that's okay to have deficiencies and like strength. Because guess what everybody else who misses high it doesn't have? Everything else that motherfucker has. So I'm not down in the kid, but you're right. It's like it depends on the offense. And it's also like, hey, if Jalen Hurts is Devontae Smith, really great potential, and Jalen Reagor, who we'll see, I think a fresh start for him would be good. Like a Drake London or somebody who's got yak, like you don't currently have that on your menu. So I think it really depends on the fit.
This class, it's hard to compare every class.
Yeah.
But this class of receivers is really deep.
Yeah.
There isn't a Jamar Chase in terms of grades coming in. Who knows? Like one of these guys could absolutely blow up. But it's a lot like 2 years ago in 2020.
Yeah.
Remember Henry Ruggs?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that was a horrific incident and what happened with him. But
he was a player. I mean, it changed everything in Vegas when they didn't have him last year.
Yeah, it changed everything. And you think about, too, like just that class of receivers. They had 6 receivers drafted in the first round. And then there were another 2 or 3 that were drafted early in the second round. Yep. All of them panned out, and except for Ruggs, obviously. But the first off the board was Ruggs at 12 to the Raiders, but they still had 6 receivers go in the first round.
Right.
Last year it was just 5 in the first round, but you had better quality grades in terms of the top guys, starting with Jamar Chase.
Yeah.
This year's a lot more like 2020. I think it's a lock that 5 go in the first round. I feel really good that 6 go in the first round. There's a chance that 7 go in the first round. You got Garrett Wilson and his teammate Chris Olave are both going to be top 20 picks. Wilson will go in the top 10, could go as high as 4 to the Jets. Then you got Drake London, who we just talked about from USC. And then you've got Jamison Williams, who would have been a top 5 pick had he not torn his ACL in the national championship game. And I still think he has a chance to go in the top 10, 12 picks in this year's class, because when you put on the tape, you're like, damn, if I get that guy and I have to lose a half a season, but I get 4.5 years of the best wide receiver in this class, like I'm good with it.
Yeah.
So those are the 4 guys. Then after that, you've got Treylon Burks, who's 6'2", 225 in the slot, who's really good after the catch. You got Jahan Dotson, who can play outside or in the slot, best ball skills of any receiver in this class coming out of Penn State. And then, so that's 6 right there. And then the 7th could be Christian Watson, the Tampa Tornado, as he goes by. He's from Tampa originally, somehow wound up in North Dakota State. But he's 6'4", long arms, 205 pounds, and he explodes down the field. I mean, his tape is kind of a joke. I was worried studying his tape that the competition was so bad. Like, you see Jamison Williams, it's like 2 yards behind the DBs, double covers. He's still got 2. This guy's like 7-9 yards every time. I'm like,
you're like, this can't be. Yeah, it's hard for me to evaluate this.
Then he goes and runs like a 4.31 at the combine, and then at the Senior Bowl against really good defensive backs, like SEC defensive backs, he's blowing them out of the water too. So that's why the pre-draft process can be important in some cases. But anyway, six or 7 guys in this class could go in the first round, and then there's a bunch of good guys in the second, third too.